Shalom, guys. So I'm up in my tree house. Actually, I'm up in the Apple Dumpling Gang tree house. That's my kids and their neighborhood friends that all ride their bikes around. They call themselves the Apple Dumplings, which that's what they're doing right now. So I got to come up here and use the house, and I wanted to do an update video because I was really thinking that I would have the next message out by now. Still part of the Key of Knowledge series that we are in. Abba had other plans, and I have been going through so much purification, so many trials. I'm sure just like many of you are. And we're all going through them differently and at different times, at different levels, in different areas of life. But we are all going through them. Extremely purposeful. Actually, I wanted to give a little bit of testimony about my trials because He's leading me to do so. And I believe that's because all of my trials right now have to do with the message that He's teaching me, which is also the message that I'm delivering. And that's how this goes. You know, don't forget that I am just as much or more, I feel like, a student. The way it feels to me is that I need these messages more than anyone. And in order for Him to have me deliver them, I need to fully go through the experience of learning them. And then, of course, I learn way more about each message after I've delivered them. And this message, upcoming in particular, He really wanted to give me a lot of modeling to go with it. So I don't believe that the next message is very far away. He's already been writing it. In fact, I believe it's almost finished, the message. But, you know, each one of my videos is a process. The gathering of information from Him, and then the recording, and then the editing, and then the battle of pushing the buttons on my keyboard and wanting to edit things out. And then Him telling me, no, that stays. Me obeying, sometimes not obeying. He knows everything that we do before we do it. So, you know, your mistakes, He's already seen those. He goes before us because He knows that we're not perfect. You know, it's the enemy who likes to keep us in a state of guilt about everything that we do or don't do. My phone keeps falling, so I'm trying to find the right place. So I'm going to give a little bit of testimony about the last month of my life, and I'm going to start right where I left off because it was just a couple of days after I released my last video, Key to the Kingdom. And so my family and I went on a 12-day RV trip. We rented an RV. This is the first time we've ever done anything like this, and we've been talking about it for years, and so we were really excited. So of course I'm going to be mentioning Otiot throughout this video because I have Otiot eyes, and this RV is like, it's a temporary dwelling, you know, like a tent. It's a beit. It was our home for the next 12 days. Don't forget that the beit also represents us walking this earth, as well as it did Yeshua walking this earth. A tent is a temporary home because this world that we're living in right now is not our permanent home. It's only temporary. So we only get about 50 miles into our trip, and my husband decides that he needs to pull over and check the tires. And when he does that, he discovers that the tire is so low, it could have popped at any minute. And so he went to fill it up, and when he started to fill up the tire, it just totally blew. So now we have a blown tire, and we're waiting for the company to bring us another one. And I kind of look at the tire as like a gimmel, you know, it's like the foot of our tent, you know, gets us where we're going. So we got a blown gimmel, and our baby is just sitting there, and something else happened at the exact same time that the tire blew. The generator stopped working. Now, I don't know why that happened at the exact same time, but the generator now became a bigger problem than the tire. So we're sitting there, and we had to sit there for hours and hours and hours, no air conditioning. We can't plug in anywhere because we're at a random gas station and there's nothing to plug into. We can't go anywhere. So after we get the tire fixed, hours later, it's dark, still haven't been able to get our generator fixed. So it was the whole next day, the whole day was basically about fixing the generator. Now I know a lot of you are trying to figure out the Otiot correlation of the generator. You can talk about that with Abba. I've talked to him about a few things, but I'll leave that one up to you. But so we finally get the generator fixed, and we think, okay, our vacation's starting now. Well, the next thing that happens is our water tank broke and is leaking water all over our stuff in the storage unit. So yeah, something's going on with the mem. And we actually ended up having to backtrack, because at this point we were like, well, maybe we should exchange it for a new one. So they have us backtrack. I don't even know how many hours we had to backtrack, because we had to go to a place that had an exchange RV for us. When we got there, we didn't even end up exchanging it. Instead, they ended up fixing the water tank, and there continued to be issues. So 4 days into our vacation, the vacation finally starts, so we thought. My son gets sick, and then my husband gets sick, and then me, and then my daughter. So all of us were sick. Now, don't get me wrong, we had a lot of amazing times, and throughout the whole entire trip, it was so obvious that Abba was there with us every single step. I mean, to the point where he was really leaving signs everywhere. I'm going to try and put a couple pictures up from our trip, and I'm not going to go really into detail. I just really want you to understand that even though we had a lot of trials on this trip, and it definitely was not what we were expecting, it was very purposeful, and it was so obvious that Abba was with us and that he was in control every step of the way, every single bit of it, and he kept leaving signs of that. And so I'm going to skip to when we got home, because when we finally got home and unloaded all of our stuff back into our house, of course, you know, all of us are going to be tired, but I was struck with extreme exhaustion, and I don't even know how to put it into words. I felt like my entire body was going into shutdown mode, and I couldn't do anything but just go to sleep. And I didn't think anything of it because, you know, it made sense that I was really tired. But it was the same thing the next day. I was experiencing really weird symptoms, not just exhaustion. And I'm not going to really go into detail, and I've never really talked about my health, but for the past several years, I've really had a lot of different health things going on that has been a mystery. Just different types of symptoms that are unusual and never really getting a lot of answers. However, over the past several years, as I have talked to Abba about things and let him lead where my research goes, I've continuously come up to mold, especially black mold. And my symptoms seemed to be always lining up with a black mold toxicity. And my husband and I have talked about it before. There were reasons why we think that it's possible that there could be black mold in our house. And if you're not familiar, you can have mold issues in your home with no visual proof. There can be mold growing behind the walls and under the floors. We've been in our house for over 10 years now, and we thought, okay, well, let's just do it. Let's get our house tested. And so we got tested. The results were off the charts. And when I'm telling you off the charts, literally off the charts, especially in our bedroom, because that's where the problem was, the biggest part of the problem. The thing is, it had been a problem for so long that it actually had become airborne and was moving through our whole ventilation system and throughout the whole entire house. And my son also has a lot of health issues ever since he was young. Now, when I say health issues, I don't want to sound like a complainer. We know that every single one of our trials are purposeful. But so now we discover that we have a major problem with black mold in our house. We know that the problem is really bad. We don't know where the colonies are, if there are more than one, and so we need to start remediation process. And so it was a period of time before we could get everything figured out and move out of the house. We went to my mom's house and stayed there while the remediation team came in. Now, I'm going to stop there for a minute because already I'm passing by so much modeling that Abba has used to teach me. So first of all, immediately he started talking to me about mold and the model of mold. I don't want to say too much because I want you to have your own conversation with Abba, but it's going to be really hard because there's so much that he has shown me. Now, first of all, mold is a type of fungus. Did you know that they call fungi a kingdom of organisms? Okay, so just think about that for a minute. And Abba led me to turn on this documentary. It was a documentary about fungus, and the funny thing is, I only watched the first 5 minutes of it because he just wanted me to hear this one part. And that is that in the world of fungi, there is fungi that is healers and killers. Did you catch that? Keep in mind that when we're talking about his word, bringing it all the way back to the most original and the Otiot, nothing is ever either or. It's always both. And there's always a negative and a positive meaning, negative and positive models. I knew that he wanted to keep teaching me about this. And so I just kept talking to him about, okay, what is this model of mold? What do you want to teach me about it? And he kept showing me how mold grows, how it has life, it is a living thing, and it grows and spreads. He kept making me think of the Gain and how the Gain, if you remember the video that I first brought that up, which is in the Hidden Knowledge series, and how it works its way through all of the word, through each oath. It also talks about mold in Scripture, and actually I'm going to talk more about that in a minute, because I'm going to actually do a tiny little Otiot study. But I first want to mention this because it's just so cool. So my remediation team, the woman who owns the business, this mold service business, her name is Deborah. Now I'm going to try not to go too far into that, but if you understand the word Deborah, and then it comes from the word Debar, the living word. Now Deborah, with a hay at the end, is talking about an insect colony of some sort, usually bees. Hey guys, so I just love to do these little inserts. So I'm just sitting here editing, and I wanted to just take an extra minute to go into this Debar and Deborah thing, because I don't want anyone to be confused. And it's really amazing, like the modeling here. So he started really teaching us about Debar in the Return to Innocence message. And we've been talking about it ever since. So Debar is Dalet Beit Resh. And it is the word for the word. And it's where we get the living word from. And Debar is all about order. That is very important to understand, because everything that he created is in perfect order. This is why it's also the word for wilderness. We talked about that not very long ago. Bimidbar is in the wilderness, and it's because in the wilderness, it's where it's just Abba's creation, nothing of man. The wilderness represents the creation and the order of Yahweh without man's stuff, ideas. And don't forget how closely this connects to the other word that we've been studying a lot lately, which is malak, which is the word for messenger, which they translated to angel, but it's a messenger, words. This is why Yeshua is called the angel of the Lord, or the malak of Yahweh, because he is the message, the living word. This is also why he is called the King of Kings, because remember, king is the exact same word. Malak, it's the exact same Otiot. And a king gives orders. Now, don't forget, going all the way back to learning about Debar, that child root and the negative and positive. The negative of Debar is a sickness or a plague. It is used many times in Scripture. You will see Debar where it is talking about sickness and plagues. The ancient Hebrews looked at sickness and plague as a reordering of population from Yahweh. This is all very important to understand. Now, when you add the Otiot for Deborah, there is a hey at the end. I'm not sure, there might be a wa in there. I don't have my book in front of me. But Deborah is talking about a colony of insects. Think about that word colony and go back to what I was saying about the mold and how we were looking for the colony. And if you know anything about bees, there is a hive hierarchy. The way that Abba has designed the bees, he designed an order to it. All the different bees have different jobs, and it is perfectly designed by the Creator. It's just so amazing, the models and examples that he gave us. And don't even get me started on the constant buzz of a bee, that buzzing frequency, right? So my house has got mold. Debar, the living word, is coming in to clean out my beit. She comes with her team, which is 2 other women, and I met these women. All of them were just special. That's the only way I can put it. So these 3 women come in and do a full remediation on my house, which took for days. I also want to go into detail a little bit about this remediation that they did, because I had no idea that they were literally going to move every piece of everything in my house, every single knickknack. They take it and wipe it down. They literally move everything. My entire closet they went through and cleaned everything. Deborah said that she was so shocked that I was not sicker than I am, and not just me, the whole entire house. It was literally right under my bed where I was sleeping, and really bad in my closet. And I never leave my house very much. I homeschool my kids, so I've been breathing a lot of this. After they got done, ripping all the floor out, come to find out that the guy who flipped this house before us, he did not do things right. It was clearly done very fast. He bought the house and wanted to flip it to make some money. the new foundation that was being built was on top of a totally different foundation. And it looked as though there could have been a mold issue before he even did the floor, and it was just covered up. So I'm sure that you can see all the modeling going on there. And right now, my bed is in my living room. My couch is in my kitchen, and our kitchen table is in a different part of the middle of the living space. And everything from my room is in boxes, and we are just going through our house right now and purging, getting rid of stuff. And so that's what we're dealing with right now. And that's not even the only thing that I'm dealing with, because you guys are going to get a total kick out of this one. My son's pet, who is a Euromastix, his name is, are you ready for it? Bumblebee. And he, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, started getting this skin disease growing all over him. So I have also been trying to heal him, and I don't think I need to even go into all of the modeling there of what that is teaching me, the growth of disease. Which brings me to the word mold, by the way, because is it Leviticus 13 or 14? One of the two, where Abba talks about mold in your house. And you can look it up, but in some translations, it actually uses a different word. What is it? A plague. And he talks about, if you come in and you discover mold in your house, or this plague in your house. Well, I looked up this word, Nun Gimel Ayin, and it actually means to touch. I'm going to read from the lexicon, actually. To touch or strike, also to bring a plague, as in a touch from God, a plague or other sire or illness as a touch. And, it's interesting because we even say when we get sick, we might say something like, oh, I think I've got a little touch of something. And did you ever recognize that? Isn't that interesting? Where does that come from? I got a little touch of something. What's also very interesting, and I'm not going to go too far into this, but I got to share all this with you guys because it's so cool. So I don't know if this is the first place that it's used in Scripture. It could be, but in Genesis 3:3, where Eve is talking, and she's talking to the Nachash, and she's talking about how Elohim has said not to even touch the fruit, and that word touch is naga. And this might be setting up for sometime in the future in these messages. I think that Abba might have me really get into a lot of Genesis, because especially the first 11 chapters of Genesis is probably the most mistranslated scripture of the entire book. And there's a reason for that, but I don't want to get into it now. But this word naga, so think about it, is Nun Gimel Ayin. And the main root there being Gimel Ayin. And that word means to gasp or to wear down. It's even used to, when it has a wa in the middle of it, it's used to talk about death. It's translated to the word die. It means to bellow. It also is a root of the word to labor. Think about labored breathing. So there's a lot here. But as Abba has been doing with all of these messages lately, is he's really bringing it back down to each individual ot. And remember, that's what he told me from the very beginning. That is the most important part, is each Otiot's individual meaning and understanding, and then how they relate to each other. So we're going to talk about Gimel for just a minute, because that's the foot, and it talks about gathering, but it also talks about being led, where you are led. You go where you are led. So you can see that these two Otiot together, the Gimel representing your walk and the Ayin representing experience, your moving experience, your walking experience, which, when we're walking and experiencing through this world, it tires us out, it brings on, it wears us down. That's why one of the words is to wear on something. It starts to break us down, that the further we walk through this life, the older that we get, our bodies start breaking down, our bodies start wearing down. This is the way Abba Father designed our bodies, to slowly be moving towards death, physical death. Now, when you put the noon in the beginning, it's all about continuous, continuation, perpetual motion, and of course talks about the seed. So when you look at this scripture about mold, it's talking about a seed that has been growing. And don't forget that this scripture, even though he's giving this model through physical houses, he's saying if you find mold in your house, well, remember, we are the house. We are the tent. And so mold within us, that's the bad seed that has been growing through our experiences in this world, mainly the teachings of man that are in opposition to the teachings of Yahweh, the Creator. But remember that this mold is hidden. It can grow and grow and grow for years, being totally hidden. And I'm telling you, man, when we first bought our house, we were so excited. Everything looked beautiful, the way that everything was done. Now, this is not the first problem that we've come to. This is the biggest, but over the 10 years we've been living here, we have seen the shortcuts. Remember with Alan talking about how shortcuts are satanic? Yeah, shortcuts on everything. But we couldn't tell when we moved in the house. Everything to the eyes, perfect. When do we get to move in this house? We love this house, everything about it. And so, as the mold has been growing and moving through the ventilation system, through our air, how much has he been talking about breath and wind and, air, all of that? Do you see how all of this is going with our message? We are the Beit here that need to be cleaned out. And this is where the next message comes in, because the next message that I'm going to be delivering is Zakar the Shem of Yahweh. It's about remembering the name of Yahweh. And you'll see that Zakar is all about cultivation. It's all about digging and cultivating. What do you do when you're preparing your garden or your land before you plant new seeds? You cultivate, you turn everything up, you get everything that's hiding in the soil, you get all the stones out, you get all the old roots out, you don't want weeds growing in there, you cultivate. And when you hear the next message, like this whole testimony that I'm talking about and everything, it's just going to be you're going to see how perfectly the model goes with it. And hopefully you guys can see an example here of how something that we're going through in life might seem really stressful and trying and almost impossible at times, but he's teaching us through every single one of them. So instead of complaining and whining, like the Israelites did in the wilderness, which we always do too, we're supposed to think about why. Remember the very simple model that we talked about not long ago in the wilderness when they had this problem that they were hungry. Well, of course they're hungry. They didn't have any food, but he allowed that. He allowed them to go through a process of hunger to teach them about desire, what they are desiring, and then what they are receiving and who's providing what they are receiving. And this is what the manna is all about, to teach them that the manna comes from the unseen. It just appears. The manna represents the living word of Yahweh. It's hidden. It comes from the unseen. It doesn't come from man. And so I'm going to wrap this video up. Okay, so before I wrap it up, I'm going crazy as I'm editing with all the, stuff that he's showing me. And I just want to point out that going back to the beginning of my trials, like we rented an RV, a beit, a temporary dwelling, and we had our own plans that we were really excited about. And those plans totally changed. We were totally thrown off course. We had our roadmap like all marked up of exactly the route that we were going to take. That completely changed, and we ended up in places that were clearly ordered by Yahweh. And I'm going to show you at the end of this video some pictures from our trip, and you'll be able to tell that these places that we ended up, they weren't our plans, they were his, and he made that so obvious. So sometimes his plans are just not what we expect. Our trip did not end up how we expected at all. And I was really patient for the first couple days of the trials, but eventually it did wear on me, and I did get angry. I was getting wore out. This was about him teaching us about beit, pitching tents with him. He was teaching us how to pitch tents, how to trust him even when the going gets tough. Now, when we got home to our permanent dwelling in this world, remember, we had been away from this mold problem that we didn't know we had for 12 days. And so that's when they say that you can really experience the symptoms, is when you go away from it for a while, and then all of a sudden you come back to it. It's kind of like our spiritual experience as well, when we get really close to him and we're spending so much time with him and we're not in the world a whole lot, and maybe days go by where we just have a lot of time with him, and then when you come back to experiencing things in the world, things are a lot more obvious. The darkness is a lot more obvious. And this remediation, first of all, think about the word remediate. It is talking about a remedy, and it's talking about making something right again. And I have to tell you, I've never experienced anything like this, and I don't know if I'm going to have the words to explain this, but it all totally happened in a way where I was not able to be in control. I didn't have time to make decisions. It was weird. I really don't know how to put it in words, but things were happening in such a way that I was not even able to make decisions, because it seemed as though the decisions were already being made and happening and being carried out, put into play, before I had a chance to really analyze things. Thinking too much and second guessing myself, it's the battle of the mind. And sometimes it causes me to have a hard time making decisions. Well, this wasn't like this. Everything was just happening. It was Yahweh who picked my remediator, Deborah. And think about how this mold problem became airborne. I mean, that goes into everything that he's been showing us about Shem, the breath, and Ruach. And remember, everything has a negative. There is the Ruach of the enemy, that lying desert wind. This is what people refer to as the Antichrist spirit. Now in Scripture, in Leviticus, when he's talking about the mold, he gives instructions to go to the high priest. Who is our high priest? It is Yeshua. It is the living word. The living word of Yahweh is our high priest. That just means, who do we go to seek remediation? The living word, Dabar. And another thing I find really interesting is that my entire life is in boxes right now, just as if we were moving. And it's the boxes that I'm using for organization. And as I'm doing this and going through this in my life experience, I keep thinking about boxes, how he showed us that the word light is basically the same word as box, because it's all, again, about order and organization, and you need light to order. And boxes are for ordering and organization. All of these things go together. And back to that word for mold, naga. Think about it. It is your growth and maturity as you walk through the experiences of life. There is a negative and positive here, but this black mold, which there's different types of black mold, and that's not the scientific name. Obviously, there's all these really crazy names, and not every mold that's black is, the black mold. But this black mold is representing what is growing in you and how you are maturing from what you are experiencing, from what you are breathing in. Remember, the Shem of Yahweh, the name of Yahweh, is all about the breath of Yahweh, the order of the Creator, the Creator's order filling you and growing in you. And don't forget that every time you see that ayin is about what you know. What you know comes from your experience. And think about how much he's talked to us about knowing, and how knowing is about intimacy. This is what he wants with us. He wants us to know him like he knows us. But, we keep going to man for our provider, even to teach us about him, not even realizing it. If you want to know him, he will teach you about himself. He doesn't need us to go through man to learn about him. And don't forget that the enemy, the seed of opposition, carries out his order through man. So what does this mean to look for mold in our own beit? We need to look for what is hidden that is not supposed to be there, that is a negative fungus that is growing, a kingdom of organisms inside our beit. Now, physically, I'm going through this right now. I still have mold toxicity in my body that I have to, detoxify from. So I am going through a detox. And as you know, when you go through a detox, you experience symptoms sometimes even worse. You go through different valleys with detox, depending on how bad it is. My body is getting cleansed out. My house, my bait here, we had another testing done after the remediation, and the whole entire house is perfectly clear. So this is awesome. And of course, I can't help but think about transformation through this whole entire thing, because, once we are completely cleaned out, 100% transformed, that's what transformation is. It is of the heart and the mind, what we understand. And we are not looking to man for all of the answers, but realizing that if we're desiring to know the truth about our Creator, Yahweh, he is right there inside of us, connecting with our hearts and minds, ready to talk to us about it every second, through everything, through every experience that you have. So, I don't know when the next message is coming out. Like I said, I believe that the actual message part that Abba has been gathering and writing is almost finished. And I'm pretty sure that before I release that video, I'm going to be reading the next story in Alan's book, because the next story is huge, like so important, very important for the message that he is teaching us through these videos. It has a lot to do with the key of knowledge. And so probably soon that will come out, and then the next key of knowledge study. So just be patient with me. Clearly, I have not been able to check all of my comments. Remember that I don't get notifications, except for once in a while. Once in a while I get notifications in my email that I have a message, and those ones I can read. But other than that, I usually periodically go through and check all of my videos for new comments, and I haven't had the chance to do that. But Abba has really been using this time. The time in between the messages is very important. And I'm really learning that, because I'm always thinking that the next message needs to get out right away, and that's always my plan, and then he always shows me that his plan is different. So his ways are not our ways. So until the next message, I love you guys so much. Stay yoked. Shalom.
My pathways to the wind, you turned me down and now I'm back again, knocking at your storm door. Lord, Lord, I'm wanting more, yes, and oh my, how my life surprises me. I sang my heart out to the moon. It sounded strange, but still I sang that tune. I didn't know he could smile like that, and I never thought I'd be looking back on it. But oh my, how my life surprises me. The forest dealt me out a natural hand. I took the cards to try and understand why I'm just a gambler who never thought he'd stand a gambler's chance. Yes, and oh my, how my life surprises me.
Good, buddy.